Yoga of Self-Perfection. This is a part of a series of talks given at the Madhapur Sri Aurobindo Study Circle in Hyderabad in 2017.
तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत् तत्सवितुर्वरं रूपं ज्योतिः परस्य धीमहि यन्नः सत्येन दीपयेत्.
The divine perfection of the human being is our aim. We must know then first what are the essential elements that constitutes man's total perfection, and secondly, what we mean by a divine as distinguished from a human perfection. So, since divine perfection is our aim as human beings, and now he says, let us understand what these two words mean. Perfection as it applies to humans, and then what is this divine element? By some, the ideal is conceived as a mundane change, by others as a religious conversion. He has mentioned two aspects or two terms: mundane change and religious change. When we look at the history of human evolution, there have been two perhaps parallel quests that have been at work. By those who believe in God, church in particular, there has been an emphasis on the ethical and moral aspects of life. When we take up the 10 Commandments as we discussed last time, they strictly refer to the ethical and moral considerations. Do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this. And this has been the religious conversion that has been brought about, in the sense that when you go back to the history of human existence, when people lived in forests as tribes and tried to eke out a living with hunting and gathering in whatever way that they were there, what prevailed was the law of the jungle. The stronger essentially controlled what happened, whether it is resources, whether it is people, whether it is wealth, whatever wealth was. Along came a civilized society where men have given up certain freedoms in exchange for security. It is called the social contract. So, the ability to walk into somebody's house, beat him with a stick and throw him out of his house and make it my house is no longer permissible. Why? Because as a society we have agreed to abide by that law. This is the social contract. But when you come into this social contract, there is a certain benefits that you get and there is a certain freedom you give out. This is how it worked out. Now, this was the first step. And for those social societies that evolved to that level, the next level came when the religious person said, no, there is something beyond just this social contract. There is a certain ethical and moral obligation also that a human being has. Something may still be acceptable in the society legally, but it is not moral or ethical, so you are not expected to do it. This is where the religion came in. And for those who did not follow the religious method, the progress of humanity manifested in terms of mundane perfection. Do what you are doing better. So he elaborates on these two elements, and throughout this chapter we will be touching upon these two elements: mundane change, mundane perfection, and religious conversion. The mundane perfection is sometimes conceived as something outward, social, a thing of action, a moral dealing, a more rational dealing with our fellow men and our environment, etc. Mundane progress deals with activities that are pertaining to this world. Mundane progress deals with the activities that gradually improvise upon the human condition. Mundane progress deals with a certain element of elevation in terms of social living. If you had to look at purely a social progress, 200 years ago, it was okay to cut somebody's hands off if he committed some theft. As a society, irrespective of religions, we have more or less arrived at a global situation where you don't cut off people's hands. You give them other punishments, but you do not physically, harm the person. This is an evolution, but a mundane evolution. But society is growing and it is evolving in consciousness even at that level. Scientific progress, medical progress that enhances the human life. The average lifespan, if you go back 300, 400 years, was somewhere around 40 to 50. Most people died either of war or of disease by the time they were 50. Today, in most parts of the world, not just developed world, most parts of the world, 60 is a given and 70 is common. This is evolved. This is a scientific progress that has happened. It is mundane in the non-religious sense of it. And most of the quests of man have contributed to the betterment of humanity age after age. This is mundane perfection of sorts. The religious aim, on the contrary, fixes before it the self-preparation for another existence after death. The commonest ideal is some kind of pure sainthood. It means a conversion of the imperfect or sinful human being by divine grace or through obedience to law laid down by the scripture or else given by the religious founder. So while on the mundane side, improved comfort, improved sanitation, improved health, improved law and order, these were the grades of perfection we were achieving. On the religious side, if you looked at the ultimate aim of existence dealt with salvation. In Christianity, salvation; in Hinduism, moksha. So whatever you did, whatever you performed, essentially contributed to your going away from this world to a better world. That was how religious perfection would get it. And the process could be at some times even torturous to the body, because that was what penance entailed. This was a different definition of tapasya than what we discussed last time, where people would subject themselves to severe austerities which were not common, but not necessarily encouraged. The obedience to the written word is an integral part of the religious perfection. So in one way, one could say that the mundane aim looked as its field of work and the goal of existence this world. Better perfection, better comfort, better life, better everything in this world. The religious conversion looked at the other world as its aim. As you conformed, if you wanted to grow religiously and arrive at the goal that the religion set for you, it was essentially salvation. One focused on this world only, the other focused in some way on that world only as its goalpost. Often the religious aim turns the back upon the world. Following the obedience often involves partial understanding of the truth And when we are too rigid, the ideal itself becomes a trap. The object of our synthetic yoga must be more integral and comprehensive. Embrace all these elements and harmonize them. And in order to do that successfully, it must seize on a truth which is wider than the ordinary religious and higher than the mundane principle. So coming back to the theme of synthesis of yoga, he's saying the mundane has to be elevated in some way, and the religious has to be expanded to include this world. This world is not something that is different from God. This is where it is leading eventually. Because synthetic yoga brings together different elements. In the evolution of humanity, there were two paths we had chosen. The mundane path, which dealt with this world, imperfection in this world. The religious path, which talks about salvation away from this world. The synthetic yoga should bring these two together. That is what Sri Aurobindo is saying. And he says it should be wider than the religious. Because wider in the sense, it should accept this world as a part of the larger universe, and higher than the mundane principles in the sense you don't look at only this world but raise your gaze upwards. Then he talks about the mind and life and body, which are the three basic instruments of humanity. And he says all of these first have to be developed, and you have to find out their ordinary possibilities. All our normal life is a trying out of these possibilities. So when you talk of expansion and perfection as a human being, invariably you end up with the three themes of what your physical body is, perfection relating to that, what your emotions are, perfection relating to that, and what your mind is and perfection related to that. All these three have to be developed, and we have to find out what their possibilities are. And he says our normal life is a trying out of these possibilities. In Sri Aurobindo's view, humanity is still in a journey of evolution. Evolution is not behind us. Evolution is with us. We are still evolving in the same Darwinian principle. The survival of the fittest would still happen. He says the existence of humanity today also is a continuation of the evolutionary principle. So then what is this survival of the fittest? How does it apply? Here, so far the evolution has been unconscious. The monkey did not aim to become the man. The monkey became the man. And some elements of monkey have been perfected. For example, the mind. Monkey applies maybe an iota of logic. Man applies 1,000 times more, maybe 10,000 times more of logic. Monkey also knows if you put your hand in the fire, it will burn. There is some element of mental understanding, but that has evolved with man. Now, where man is going today, unconsciously, our life is a trying out of these possibilities of body, emotions and mind. It is still an experiment that the nature is continuing to conduct. The only difference is man has the option of conscious collaboration in this evolution. And that conscious collaboration is nothing but yoga. Paramahamsa Yogananda also says that yoga is nothing but compressing thousands of lives of evolution into one life. Because once you are conscious, you start working on yourself towards perfection. The instruments of the body, the three of them, they have to arrive at a point when they can open themselves to the power and presence of the spirit and admit its direct workings. This direct working affects a conversion of the whole being, which is the indispensable condition for our real perfection. He brings in a new element here, the presence of the spirit. He says mind and body and emotions have to evolve, the prana. Manomaya, Pranamaya and Annamaya, they have to evolve. They have to open themselves to a higher power. What is this higher power? The power of the spirit, he says, and its direct work. The philosophy of Sri Aurobindo subscribes to the evolutionary thought. He is one of the philosophers who is called an emergent philosopher, where stone to plant, plant to animal, animal to man. But he adds one very important element to this emergent philosophy. He says, the reason this is happening is because already there is a spirit that has come down into the matter. What is it that is driving evolution? It is that consciousness of the spirit. So it is a cyclical. There is a moving down and there is a moving up. When you go to somebody like a Darwin and say, okay भैया monkey तक तो पहुंच गए, man आ गया, अब आगे क्या करना है? But Darwin बोलेगा आपको कुछ नहीं करना है, जो होना है nature कर लेगा. This is the scientific approach which does not take into account the deeper truths of Upanishads, the deeper truths of Veda, the deeper truths that relate to the overall universe. Because for us, this is not an accident to say that stone to plant, plant to animal. What is it that made the stone blind towards the plant? What is it that drove the plant towards the monkey and monkey towards the man? It is the consciousness that is already embedded into it. There is an inherent awareness. Where did it come from? It came from the Supreme Spirit. That is where the cycle becomes complete. And Sri Aurobindo is referring to that spirit. And he says there is actually a higher force that is pulling this evolution like a magnet. And it is because of that higher force, it is that inner spirit, that the monkey has evolved to the man. It is not an accident. In fact, if you go purely by the scientific logic, there are these gaps that are not explained by science. I touched upon it in one of the previous sessions. Where, how did the stone suddenly start, how did the cells in the stone start mutating? Because that is how the next step emerged, right? I keep a stone in my house, I can even pour water on it every day. Will it mutate and become a bigger stone? If it doesn't happen in 24 hours or 24 years, why does it happen in 2.4 million years? Because fundamental properties are the same. I can analyze it under a microscope. There is nothing in that stone that will make it multiply. There is no logical reason it should multiply. There is a gap that has remained that way. Nobody can explain it even in the scientific terms. Similarly, from the plant to the animal also, from the emotion to the mind also, there are these black holes in evolutionary theory. And those black holes are plugged when you say there is an evolutionary spirit that is seeking itself. And it is this spirit that helps the evolution to grow into the truth and power of the spirit, and by the direct action of that power to be made a fit channel for its self-expression will therefore be the principle and the whole object of an integral yoga of self-perfection. This is almost the central reason why he is adding a yoga of self-perfection. Let me read it again. What is the purpose of the human being? What is the next evolutionary step of the mind and body and emotions? The next step is to grow into the truth and power of the spirit. And then, by the direct action of that power, to be made into a fit channel for its self-expression. First, we have to grow to be able to receive this higher consciousness. First, what is the next step for us? As we are not fit instruments yet. Our emotions are unstable. Our mind is chaotic. It is not ready for higher consciousness. The first step for us is we have to grow into the truth and power of the spirit. Once we are able to purify ourselves to become the instruments of the spirit, then we will be made a fit channel for the expression, for the self-expression of that spirit. First, Aham Brahmasmi. We have to realize that we have the capacity to manifest that spirit. That spirit of Brahma has to manifest through us. We should become capable of receiving it. And then this whole body becomes the instrument of that spirit. And therefore, this is the principle and the whole object of an integral yoga of self-perfection. Now, how do we become the fit instrument? What is the next step? Fine, this is a glorified philosophy you have given us. What should we do? If you go to the internet in the last 3-4 years, one of the sadhaks in Sri Aurobindo ashram by name Narad, he's gone and interviewed a lot of the ashramites. Now, if you go to Pondicherry, you have a very peculiar situation. You go, hum ashram jayenge. A lot of people, Sri Aurobindo ashram is there on the map, tourist map, so they all end up at Sri Aurobindo ashram. Now, they are a little perplexed because they don't find anything special. They find a building, they find a samadhi, and everybody else is wearing, as though they've all come to Pondicherry on a vacation, everybody is in shorts and t-shirts and going around. There is no arti, there is no Swamiji. Now this is totally confusing. Without a Swamiji, without an arti, without a puja, without anything, what kind of an ashram is this? And they're all walking around. Nobody knows who is a great spiritual soul, who is a normal soul. You can't make out any difference. It's very peculiar. Even when I send friends, they also ask, "Karna kya hai wahan pe?" Now, what Narad has done is he's caught hold of these people who are walking around quietly. They mind their business. And they say, wait, please sit down. Tell me about yourself. And then somebody says, so I came here and I was here when this major milestone in Sri Aurobindo's ashram's history, when supramental descent happened, I was sitting in the playground. And for somebody like me, that is one of the most important yogic events that happened in my path. And if somebody says, I was there that day, I'll first Sashtang Danda Pranam kar lete. Lekin pata nahi chalta hai. They all wear white saris and shorts and walk around. Nobody knows who they are. Now, when he started talking to a gentleman by name Anurakta, who is a South African white male, who I think just passed away in the last 2-3 years. 2 years. 2 years back. There is an interview with him. Now here was a 25-year-old man who was in South Africa and he wanted to come to India. So he met somebody who had visited like a tourist, Sri Aurobindo ashram. And this man said, listen, if you're going there, you might as well go there. There is a very big saint there, you don't miss it. Okay, fine. This man came, he spent some time. At that time, he had to take permission. He took all that, he spent some time. And then he said, I want to stay back. Mother said, no, not yet. So he went back to South Africa. And after 6 months or 1 year, he left South Africa, came here and settled down. This was perhaps in the 1920s or 30s. He was in South Africa but belonged to England actually, if I'm not mistaken. His family is from England, yeah. Not French, English. So, this Anurakta was a sadhak and he was at a very advanced stage, 60, 70 years when Narad interviewed him. And at that time, he talked about integral yoga. What is the yoga we have to do? Because I'm coming back to the spirit, what is our next step? He said very simple. Keep your mind silent. You don't have to do anything. Don't think. In fact, you don't have to do anything actively. Just don't do what you are doing. So just remain silent. Try your best to keep yourself in silence. You don't have to do anything more. All the rest the Divine Spirit will do. Look at the beauty of it. तुम्हें दिन में 2 बार मेडिटेशन करना है, 3 बार प्राणायाम करना है, सूर्य नमस्कार कर कुछ नहीं करना है. You just remain silent, be silent and keep doing whatever you're doing. He used to manage the paper factory and he used to have a hell of a time because he had to deal with proper labor. But the yoga was simple for him. He said just remain silent. The yoga of Sri Aurobindo at one level is very simple. It is about focusing on 3 elements. Your body, your emotions and your mind. And all you have to do is don't do what you are doing. That's all. You don't have to do anything additional. Try not to be overly emotional. Keep your body away from tamasic tendencies. Keep your mind a little silent. And the higher force, once it will come down, will automatically start working. And specifically Anurakta says, the higher force will come and do their mental transformation and vital transformation. You can listen to his talk, it's on YouTube. Just type Narad Anurakta. Okay, there are some 50 beautiful talks of various sadhaks. So we don't have to do much for this higher spirit to transform us. The spirit is already there. Your higher consciousness is waiting to descend inside of you. It is you who is not allowing it. We are actually pushing it. In the process of this change, there must be, by the very necessity of the effort, two stages of working. First, there will be a personal endeavor of the human being. The second stage of this yoga will be a persistent giving up of all action of nature into the hands of the divine. We aspire that the divine becomes the master of the yoga and affects the entire spiritual ideal of conversion of the being. So we don't have to struggle, we just have to give up our problems. In fact, at some times when we start looking inside of ourselves, we are all Fevicol specialists. We are all Fevicol specialists. We put Fevicol all over our body and walk around. Start working with somebody, you put some Fevicol, take that attachment. वो मेरे से बिना बताए ये काम किया वो काम किया. Right? This is what we do at work. Right? We are Fevicol. जहाँ जहाँ जाएंगे कुछ चिपका के वापस आएंगे. We just have to stop doing that. जहाँ भी कुछ भी देखेंगे अटैचमेंट बन जाता है हमारे पास. Stop getting into these attachments. Try not to be Fevicol. It's a big problem. We don't realize it. We don't realize it. It's a big problem. So he says, first, there has to be a personal endeavor. And second, a persistent giving up. Give everything up to him. He will take care of it. Now, what is this personal effort? Two elements of personal effort. A spiritual desire of the divine and of the divine perfection. Of unity with him in all our being and a spiritual perfection of our nature. First, you should want to have spirituality in your life. That is the first desire. Develop an interest in wanting to evolve. Develop an interest in spiritual evolution. In a way, Sri Aurobindo uses another word for this in the small book of the Mother. It is aspiration. Try to develop a basic aspiration for a higher living. Second, these are two aspects of personal effort that he is pointing out. Second, get rid of all in him that belongs to a lower working, of all that stands in the way of his opening to the spiritual truth and its power. So one, you should have a desire for spiritual perfection, and two, you should get rid of the lower workings, rejection, aspiration and rejection, personal effort. Aspire, develop a desire to be better than who we are yesterday, and second, ensure that whatever is standing in the way of this spiritual growth, we start consciously letting go of it. Don't justify it. Reject it. And rejection will not happen in one day. When you say, get rid of everything in you that belongs to the lower working, we are talking of hundreds of lives of accumulated negative elements. And these were elements that were required for us at some part in the past. Ego was a help, ego is the bar. Sri Aurobindo says elsewhere. One has to at least make a mental note of the problems that are there in our spiritual path and start saying, I don't want this, I will not support it. We won't justify it anymore. When we get into anger and altercation, we don't say, मैंने ऐसा किया क्योंकि उसने ऐसा किया. For us, we don't have those excuses anymore. By personal effort, a precursory change, a preliminary conversion can be effected. It amounts to a greater or less spiritualizing of our mental motives, our character and temperament, and a mastery, stilling or changed action of the physical and vital life. So when we talk about this spiritual desire, aspiration, and we are getting rid of lower working rejection, aspiration and rejection have to be applied at the three levels: physical, vital and mental. Physical, emotional, mental. Annamaya Purusha, Pranamaya Purusha, Manomaya Purusha. So what happens is when we start developing this, gradually there will be a changed action of the mind, of the emotions and of the body. There is a certain stilling that happens. I'll just digress for a second our whole temperament needs to undergo a spiritual change, right? This is what it is. Sometimes what happens is when we first come to the spiritual path, we carry an intense aspiration. And maybe for the first year, first 40 days, first 3 months, we do a lot of nice things, wonderful things. सुबह 5 बजे उठ लिया, कैसे भी करके meditation भी कर लिया, थोड़ा आसन भी कर लिया, थोड़े. Slowly after 3 months, our nature catches up. And then again we sleep at 11:30, 12, again we get up at 7:30, again our whole routine has gone for a toss. Then again we start feeling guilty, and again after 1 year, again kushti karte hain nature se. Fir se, this is how spiritual work happens. It is no exception. And the tragedy is some of us like me may even die at 70 with this kushti going on. Okay. What I have realized after years and years of kushti is that one has to change the inner temperament of what we naturally like and dislike. It is not about kushti. You can try and do kushti and suppress that nature for some time, but eventually the nature will take a triumph. You have 30 years of intensity. It has 300 lives of intensity. Which is stronger? Nature is stronger. Invariably वो फिर से हम पे बैठ जाता है. उसको क्या करना है? It is this 600-pound gorilla. That gorilla का taste को हमको बदलना है. You have to gradually change the taste of that gorilla, what it likes and what it doesn't like. For example, I'll give you a simple example which all of you can relate. You all have your favorite sleeping position, right? You all sleep in one particular posture when you go to sleep, right? Some people sleep on their stomach, some people sleep on their back, some people sleep a little tilted this way, some people. Now tonight when you go back, try to fall asleep in 10 minutes but in a different posture. हो पाएगा? नहीं हो पाएगा. It will take you another 45 minutes to 1 hour of struggling this and that to sleep in that new posture. Tomorrow हो पाएगा? No. It will take you another 30 days or so for your body to adjust to the new position, where as soon as you lie down in that position, it will sleep. You have to slowly change the taste of this gorilla by this approach. थोड़ा taste goes to spirituality and gradually increase that taste. But keep on doing it. Don't give up on it. But don't try to give it a whole meal of this new meal. No. Give it a little one day. Give it a little more the second day. Give it a little more the third day. It has to work this way. But persistence is your success. Keep on persisting. Keep on persisting. Keep on persisting. You are somebody whose natural tendency is to leave a trail of chaos in your house. You take a book from here, you read it, you leave it there, you open the toothpaste, you leave the cap on the side, you are rushing to the office, you throw the wet towel on the bed, you go away. This is your natural temperament. One day the whole thing will not change, even though your spouse might want it. Start with one thing. Towel. I will not put the wet towel on the bed. Make it a sadhana for a month. Make it a sadhana for 3 months if it is not yet changed. Dhire, 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 the temperament will turn. Identify similar things in the emotions. Don't try to solve all emotional problems in one day. Take one and start working on it. Start working on it. Dhire, dhire, but don't give up. This is how spiritual nature can be brought into our sense. It will not happen one day. The intensity of aspiration is good, but it won't sustain. Along with that intensity, you need this persistence of effort. And this is Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga. Each person has to identify in himself or herself what are the things, क्या बदलना है हमें, हम हर एक को खोजना है. वो खोज के वो 4-5 चीज़ें आइडेंटिफाई करना है और धीरे धीरे फर्स्ट टू मेक ए मेंटल नोट. मुझे ये करना है, मुझे ये करना है, मुझे ये करना है. पहले 5 दिन नहीं होगा, कोई बात नहीं. अगले 5 दिन में 1 बार होगा, अगले 5 दिन में 4 बार होगा, अगले 5 दिन में 5 बार होगा. This is how nature changes. It doesn't change overnight. But persistently one has to keep working on it. By personal effort, a precursory change, a preliminary conversion can be effected. It amounts to a greater or less spiritualizing of our mental motives, our character and temperament, and a mastery and stilling or changed action of the vital and physical life. This mentalized, ethical, and moral and spiritual is only a part of the journey. This is a ethical, moral, spiritualizing, but it's only a part of the journey. There's more. Some communion or unity of the soul in the mind with the divine, and some partial reflection of the divine nature in the mentality of the human being. These are things that start happening slowly. That is as far as man can go by his unaided or indirectly aided effort, because that is an effort of the mind, and mind cannot climb beyond itself permanently. He says, kushti karo. Kushti karke jahan tak aa sakte ho, come there. And then the higher power will start the transformation. At the most, the mind can help you arrive at a spiritualized or idealized mentality. A greater perfection can only be arrived at by a higher power entering in and taking up the whole action of the being. Okay? So this is what personal effort can do. So he said there were two things he said earlier. One is a personal effort and a persistent self-giving. So he has now talked about the personal effort. How far can the personal effort lead you? It can lead you to the point where you can have a partial reflection of the divine nature in the mentality of the human being. It can arrive at a spiritualized and idealized mentality. But beyond this, the second stage of this yoga will therefore be a persistent giving up of all the action of the nature into the hands of a greater power. Anyadha saranam nasti tvameva saranam mama. When we try to change anger, for example, it doesn't change. After 5, 10, 15 years, you realize it is not in my hands, and that is where the surrender comes. The double character of our yoga raises it beyond the mundane ideal of perfection, while at the same time it goes to beyond the loftier, intenser, and the much narrower religious formula. So this double character of personal effort and persistent giving up. He now goes back to the two themes and expands. Now he is linking what he said versus what was happening so far. The mundane ideal regards man always as a mental, vital, and physical being, and it aims at human perfection well within these limits. It ignores the spiritual element and leaves it underdeveloped. It does not aspire beyond the mind. Its aim is limited to the terrestrial perfection of the normal human mind. So this is how the mundane aim looks only at the physical, vital, and mental, and it cannot exceed into the spiritual domain. He says that needs to be brought in. A yoga of integral perfection regards man as a divine spiritual being involved in the mind and life and body. Now, this is something one can try to understand a little bit. He's turning the whole perception of ourselves upside down or inside out. Listen to this sentence carefully. A yoga of integral perfection regards man as a divine spiritual being involved in mind and life and body. If you read Osho's epitaph, right? Epitaph is what you write on the grave. Osho, we all know Osho, Rajneesh. If I recollect correctly, it has something like this. Never born, never died. Visited earth between so and so year and so and so year. Never born, never died. Visited earth between so and so year. The yoga of integral perfection regards man as a divine spiritual being involved in the mind and life and body. This is a host. The spirit inside is the guest. How many of you have watched Men in Black? What happens when you watch Men in Black is the body opens and inside there is a little fellow. You remember that episode? The body is the host, that little fellow is the divine spiritual being. You look far more beautiful than that ugly little thing, but I'm trying to point you to the spirit of the thing. We confuse ourselves as the mind, life and body. There are beautiful, when spiritual thought comes, it comes to humanity. It doesn't come only to the people between Kashmir and Kanyakumari. It's just that the expression of that thought may vary. There was one beautiful quote. Don't think of yourself as the bottle, you are the genie in the bottle. How beautifully it has been captured. The spirit versus the body. We confuse ourselves like this. When we go back, the more we realize we are the spirit, the farther along we are on the spiritual path. For example, even when Sri Krishna says that Sitoshna Sukha in Bhagavad Gita, he says you have to go beyond the dualities. How can I go beyond the dualities? My body is working at 98.4 degrees centigrade. I am comfortable in a room between 20 degrees and 35 degrees centigrade. Now, whether you are Arjuna or whether you are Srinivas, if the thermostat is set at 15 degrees, we are all going to shiver. So why is Sri Krishna saying you have to go beyond dualities? The body's tendency is you are comfortable in that temperature. So it doesn't gel with the reality of my existence. So why is Sri Krishna saying this? Was he wrong? How can I rise beyond heat and cold? The secret here is to understand that you are the spirit and not the body, and as you grow spiritually, your center of gravity shifts from the body to the spirit. And once your center of gravity is 90% at the spirit and 10% at the body, you can control the body whichever way you want. And what happens to the body does not affect you instantly at the consciousness level. The pain may come to the body, but you can watch the pain as the spirit. This is how one has to evolve in the spiritual dimension. Move towards the spirit. So what does integral perfection have to do, or how does it relate to the mundane and the religious idea? Integral perfection rejects nothing that is essential to the mundane aim but enlarges it. Finds and lives in greater and truer meaning. The religious ideal looks away from the earth to a heaven or even beyond all heavens to some kind of nirvana. The ordinary idea of perfection is a religio-ethical change, often an ascetic abrogation and rejection of the vital impulses, and in any case, a supra-terrestrial motive and reward. In the end, the aim of the religious ideal is not a conversion of our mental, physical nature, but putting on a spiritual nature and being. And since that is not possible here on earth, it looks for consummation by a transference to another world. So again, he is reiterating what we said earlier, saying that the mundane ideal does not capture the spiritual essence that a human being has, and the religious ideal ignores this world. But the integral yoga founds itself on a conception of the spiritual being as an omnipresent existence, the fullness of which comes not essentially by a transference to other worlds or a cosmic self-extinction, but by a growth out of what we now are into the consciousness of the omnipresent reality. We have to move to our own reality. The reality which is hidden inside of us, which is not revealing itself to us. We have to find that reality and identify ourselves with that reality. The omnipresent reality which we always are in the essence of our being. It is there inside of us. We just have to identify it. Admitting the supracosmic truth and life in worlds beyond it admits to the terrestrial as a coined term of the one existence and a change in the individual and communal life on earth as a strain of its divine meaning. Essentially, he says that the purpose of human existence and the purpose of earth is a gradual spiritual transformation and eventually a manifestation of the higher truth through transformed spiritual human beings. That is the purpose of this particular domain, of why we are in there. To open oneself to the supracosmic divine is an essential condition of this integral perfection. But now he adds a second element. So far he's talked of the individual part, right? Now he adds a second element. To unite oneself with the universal divine is another essential condition. Union with the Supreme Being, consciousness and bliss, and a unity with its universal self in all things and all beings. This is one of the important, annoying, and commonly ignored elements of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. The universal aspect, collective sadhana, collective consciousness is an important element of Sri Aurobindo's yoga. We cannot isolate ourselves. So, what we find it convenient or even logical is that भाई आपने अभी तक जो बताया वो करने में तो 2 लाइफ लग जाएंगे, अब बाकी लोगों की चिंता मैं क्यों करूँ? How can I start worrying about collective aspect when the individual itself is a imperfect aspect? The important point here is to understand the very, very critical element of our existence. No man is an island. The truth is, even if you're a spiritual person, you will find problems in your life, at work, at home, at wherever you go. And what we do is we fight with those problems, sometimes very, very agitatedly, sometimes partially. We have to develop a spiritual outlook even for the problems that come to us in life. It is not that, hey, this man cheated me, therefore he is bad, I am good. I am feeling bad because I got cheated. We have to accept a certain spiritual outlook even while dealing with that person. It may be easy to do a violent or a verbal retaliation, physical or verbal. But that is beyond the purview of our spiritual living. And somewhere we have to extend to the circumstances and people around us the same theme that we are applying. I am spiritual inherently, I am a higher consciousness, but he is not. ये गधा नहीं है, ये भी higher consciousness है. We have to accept that element. And somewhere we have to figure out how to solve problems while embracing that person from our heart, from inside. When we come into the spiritual line, this is a very important side discussion also. In the interest of time, I'll try to make it crisp. Just one sentence, 2 sentences I'll say. You can spend time, you all know all of these things very well. We are all in a situation where, based on our karmic past, a certain set of linkages are there with us. And linkages could be circumstances, people, all of experiences, all of these things. But based on the spiritual future, there is a new set of circumstances opening up in front of us. We are constantly between these two sets of circumstances. Our past, हमारा जो past है, उसके वजह से there are certain set of relationships, circumstances and experiences हमारे पीछे. And again, there are a few set of circumstances people experiences based on our highest spiritual potential. Highest. Depending on how much time we spend on one versus the other, our next life is going to be that. क्योंकि हम लाइफ में कभी ना कभी every person asks himself, how is it that everything is okay with that person and how is it that I am stuck with these kind of situations? How is it that that fellow gets everything easily? How is it that I have to struggle for everything? How is it that this person is able to have focus on spiritual life without any mundane problems, whereas I am stuck with so many mundane problems and a lot of spiritual interest? In sabka answer is in this duality. We have to choose. The more we spend our energy on the past karmic linkages, energies and issues, and the more we get agitated, the more our future life will be bound by that set of circumstances. The more we spend time with the possibilities of the highest spirituality that are in front of us, the more we spend time with people who are of a more positive karma, the more we end up in satsangs and try to pull ourselves to the highest level possible. The more we meditate, the more we go away to these secluded spots and try to spend, the more you are changing your future and future circumstances. So, ये समझना थोड़ा important भी है. We'll cover it again at a suitable time. So, talking about this universality, he says, this unity will not be an inmost spiritual oneness qualified so long as the human life lasts by a separative existence of mind and life and body. Full perfection is a possession through the spiritual unity of unity too with the universal mind, universal life and universal form, which are the constant terms of the cosmic being. One, perfection of the individual, or at least awareness of the necessity of perfection, effort to the extent possible, surrender where we have to open up to the higher forces, and then a conscious expansion, a conscious embracing of the circumstances and people that are immediately around us. Don't think of these as an abstract terms, think of these as in practical terms. An embracing of the universal mind, the universal life and the universal form.
So I was pulled away by the conclusion that she had. Suppose, to her conclusion, I can really conclude that when Jesus Christ was crucified, right, he was completely lifted up from his body consciousness to his spiritual consciousness. Where it was completely, he was being tortured, he was going through lots of pain, but it was this very high conscious level through which he was submissive to God, was unmindful of what was happening to him. So can we exemplify it, with that? Because when we actually see spiritual at a very higher platform, we think that there is no involvement of any body pleasure. Okay, so this is why exactly I was told that.
So Jesus even went to one level higher, where at his level of consciousness he was able to forgive the people who were inflicting pain to him at that moment. At that moment, we can all 10 years later talk about forgiveness of that fellow who insulted us. He was saying, forgive them, they do not know what they are doing. Because he was able to retain that level of consciousness. If we are able to even practice that, and that comes from this embracing at the universal life, universal mind and universal form. He did not see himself as a victim and the other person as an aggressor. He saw the other person as an extension of who he was. He was able to embrace that larger perspective. In the Hindu scriptures, there is a beautiful Purusha Suktam. Sahasra Sirsha Purusha Sahasraksha Sahasrapat. Thousands of heads who are at our collective level, essentially we can regard ourselves as maybe 20 heads of a single spirit. Unless we bring it down to our experiential level. Imagine if you chant with 50 people, 100 people sitting and you chant Sahasra Shirsa Purusha, and then each of you regards yourself as one of those heads. You have a different spiritual understanding of that universal consciousness. Sri Aurobindo writes, there is a beautiful write-up and also it is recorded in Nandita's voice. He says, you are the ultimate Brahman, and it is that Brahman that is listening to me through you. It is the same Brahman that is speaking through me. It is the same Brahman that is listening through you. It is that universal consciousness, and we have to learn to embrace it through difficulties. And that acceptance has to happen. Since human life is still accepted as a self-expression of the realized divine in man, there must be an action of the entire divine nature in our life. And this brings in the need of the supramental conversion, which substitutes the native action of the spiritual being for the imperfect action of the superficial nature, and spiritualizes and transfigures the mental, vital and physical parts of the body. He talks about the highest level of consciousness that is manifesting, which is the supramental consciousness, he calls that. What he talked about, the spirit coming down and transforming the instruments, he now gives a specific name to that. He says it is the supramental conversion, it is the highest level of consciousness that comes down and starts the conversion. These three elements, a union with the Supreme Divine, a unity with the universal self, and a supramental life action from this transcendent origin constitute the essence of the integral divine perfection of the human being. So he has laid down in this last paragraph almost the entire rationale for this section of integral yoga. Why yoga of self-perfection? It is because what are the elements of yoga of self-perfection? 1. Union with the Supreme Divine. 2. Unity with the universal self. And 3rd, the supramental life action from its transcendental origin. And then now next chapter onwards he takes up more and more detail. We talked about the body, the mind and the life. Now he takes up each of them and gets into very, very detailed analysis. What is its present position? What is the ideal position? What is its present position? What is its ideal position? And it can get fairly detailed at some level, particularly when he speaks about the mind. It's like a surgeon who is really doing surgery. He describes every nerve, every capillary, every location inside of the body, inside of the mind, and he starts analyzing them, each of them. Then he describes, this is the problem. You see this little knot here? This is a problem. You see this little scratch here? This is a problem. And by the way, this knot has to be tackled in this way. This scratch has to be tackled. It gets into a very detailed amount of analysis and expression of each of ourselves. Essentially, he's talking about each of us. And then he says, don't worry if there are this many problems, that is your ideal. And you will get there. Start working like this. It's a very beautiful, set of chapters. So with that, we will conclude today the second chapter of Yoga of Self-Perfection, Integral Perfection. Let us gather ourselves in silence for a few minutes. Let us thank the Mother for the opportunity to come together.